what is the primary purpose of a lens? Why do we have lenses on our cameras? Well, the primary purpose of a lens is to take whatever's out there and focus it onto the film plane. The other one is magnification, which we call focal length. It can be from wide angle to telephoto. But the two main purposes of it is, number one, the main purpose is to focus, and the secondary purpose for it is the focal length, to zoom in, the magnification, to zoom in or zoom out on it. Okay, we're looking at the camera now from the side view. Now, the lens is here up front and the body's back here, and what we're looking at, as the light enters in through this side, it comes and it actually flips. It hits the lenses and it flips upside down right there in about the center, and then it flips upside down and hits the CCD. Now, we talked about focal length, and this is what we're talking about. It's actually happening inside of here. And the focal length is the distance from the CCD to where it flips upside down. We're looking at a lens which is an 11 to 16 millimeter, f2.8, and then the other thing we'll be looking at is the filter size, which is a 77. Now the filter size is also kept up in millimeters. So if you're going to get a lens, let's say 70, or a filter that says 77 millimeters to match this. We'll talk about that in just a second. The focal length, which is the 11 to 16, that's also measured in millimeters. But the aperture, how wide it opens up, is actually kept in fractions, which is an f2.8, which is 1 over 2.8. The first thing I want to talk about is the filter that's going to go on it. So we saw it back here on the back side of this thing that it was a 77. So it takes a 77 millimeter filter on it. So here is a 77 millimeter filter. And all that means is we're going to remove this cap, and we can take this lens and we can put this 77 millimeter filter on top of it, and I can twist that, and it will screw right down onto the lens. So now I have my filter on the front of it. Now let's see if we can get a little close up on it. Those are the threads right there that it's going to come in and zoom down or tighten down onto as it screws onto it.
Okay, I have made what is kind of a representation of a camera. Now, this camera has a lens on it. Now, right now, this camera, the lens on it is a very short focal length. The focal length is what is the distance between the film plane or the sensor and where it flips upside down inside of the lens, okay? So you've learned about that before, about the image flipping upside down. Now this is the distance between those two. This is the focal point, and this is the focal length that goes from here to here. Now let me just show you how this works. As we're looking at it right now, this has a very wide field of view, meaning it can see all the way over here, all the way over there, and it can see tons of it, okay? It's got this huge field of view. Now, as I increase the focal length is the distance between the film plane or the sensor and the focal point where the image flips upside down inside of the lens. As I increase that, look what happens to the field of view. Okay, look what the angle is. Right now it's really wide angle, and it's about to go to telephoto. As I start to slide this forward and increase that distance, increase the focal length, all of a sudden we have something that's really telephoto. That all you can see is just that little bit going out instead of everything across the table.
Now, an example that we can kind of use is using a ruler. Now, I've taken this ruler and I've put zeros back behind the centimeter marks, so that way you can see which is 10 millimeters, 20 millimeters, 30, 40, and all the way up. And that's just for the purposes of being able to tell what's going on. Now, this is going to act kind of like our lens in a way, and this is what we're going to be able to see. So if I take this and I put this on at 50 millimeters, now that's kind of what you're going to be able to see with a 50 millimeter lens. meaning that's as wide angle as it's going to be. Now if I take this and I'm going to run it down to 200, okay, it's now down at 200, click. Now that's what you're going to be able to see. Let's take this out into the real world and see how this actually looks. If I'm going to shoot at, let's say, a 30 millimeter, it would capture all that you see right there. That would be about 30 millimeters, let's say. So now, if I take this down to, let's say, let's take it to 200. I'm going to pull this down to 200. And then now, whatever, we might just get just that computer or just that table right there in it, because we've taken our focal length from the 30 down to the 200. Okay, so let's talk about this lens we have for a second. It is the Nikon. It's an 80 to 200 millimeter lens, and the f-stop opens up to a 2.8, as we can read by that. Now this is a great lens because it opens up really wide, and the fact that it has a good zoom on it from 80 to 200. And then, but what really makes this impressive is really the size of that lens right there, the opening of it that allows it to go to a 2.8. Now let's look at the next one. This one is a Tokina, and it is a 11 to 16, and then it opens up to 2.8 as well. Now, what do we know about this lens compared to this lens? Well, this lens is a telephoto lens, and this lens is a wide-angle lens. We can tell because of the 11 to 16, where this is an 80 to 200. But the next thing I want to talk about is the aperture. Now the aperture is how wide this lens can open up. Now this lens, let me find my little button. Okay, this lens right now is closed down. Oh, that's not the right button. Ah, there it is. It's closed down, but I can open it up so you can see it opening up wide. Now the wider that this can open, the more light that it can let through. And you can actually see what it's doing to the camera right now, my iPhone that I'm recording with. That as I open it up, it's letting more light through it, and then my iPhone's saying, oh, there's more light there, I better make things a little bit darker. Okay, so it can close down, and I believe this one closes down about an f32, and then it opens up, and this one will open up to a 2.8. And so the wider open it is, the more light that it lets through, and then the smaller it is, the less light it lets through. And we'll get more into aperture in other lessons as we get into that. Aperture does several things for you. One of them is it affects your shutter speed on how wide or how small it is, and it also affects your depth of field. That means how much is in focus along the z-axis, but we'll get into that in a different lesson. Now, there are different kinds of lenses. There are what are wide-angle lenses, and this is a very wide-angle lens, because it allows you to go open as much as an 11 millimeter. And then there are other lenses that allow you to zoom up. So this one is an 18 to 70 that allows you to zoom up. This lens, like we said, this is the 80 to 200. And then this other lens on my other camera is, it's an 18. This one's an 80 to 200. This one's an 18 to 200. So now every lens that I have here is a zoom lens. And a zoom lens basically is that it allows you to change from one focal length to another focal length. Okay, that's what a zoom lens is. Now a lens that I don't have with me today is called a primary lens. A primary lens, you'll still have the same numbers. You'll have a number that says whatever the focal length is something or other millimeters. You'll have your aperture numbers. You'll also have your, see if that one got, there we go. You'll also have your filter number. But the difference is on a prime lens is it will not zoom. This is an 18 to 200. Now many times people think that when you talk about zooming, a zoom lens, what that has to do is It basically zooms up on something, and that's true, but you can have a wide angle zoom lens. So this is wide angle to wide angle. Super wide angle to not as wide angle, but still it's wide angle. Whereas this one is a zoom lens, and there is no wide angle in it. And the zoom basically just says that it changes from one to the other. So this is an 80 to 200. The lenses we just went over were the prime and the zoom lens. We also talked about wide angle and telephoto, and there's one other one called a macro lens. Now the difference between these and a macro lens is a macro lens will allow you to zoom up really close on something that you're really close to. So you're going to use it for shooting pictures of flowers or the keyboard or ants or anything that you want to get really close up onto.